When it comes to making delivery commitments, mapping story points to hours to estimate your work is a terrible piece of advice. In fact, there is a very simple exercise that can be used to review this paradox. A couple of months ago, I had a meeting with a client of mine to talk about their main problem, lack of predictability. There was something that he said which particularly struck me. When we meet with our teams and they say, this story is 2 story points, I do the math in my mind. 1 point is approximately 3 days, and I know right away it will take 6 days. If they say the story is 8 points, that would translate to about 3 weeks. And I don't understand why this approach always ends up wrong. Well, let's dig deeper into it. Now, before we begin, let's clarify that when we talk about cycle time, we're talking about the amount of elapsed time between the moment a work item starts and when it finishes. I want to walk you through a very quick and easy exercise to prove my point. Let's build a scatter plot with story points on the x-axis and cycle time on the y-axis. We'll define 1, 2, 3, 5, and 8 points on the x-axis. Of course, you can adjust these values based on your own context. Now, let's plot how many days have taken for a story assigned with 3 story points to be completed. In this example, that story needed 12 days to be finished. Now, let's map story points to hours for the last 20 to 30 completed stories. For each work item, add the story points and then add the actual cycle time it has taken to complete the item. Moving on, we would expect that items with 1 story point will be relatively quick to complete, and as the story point value goes up, the time that an item has taken will slightly increase. This is what the correlation between story points and cycle times looks like for my client. If you look into the cycle times perspective, the items with 1 story point can range from anything between 1 day all the way up to 22 days. The same results are observed for items with 2 story points and 3 story points. The most surprising trend here is that their 8-point stories are in the same date range as the items with 1 story point. Use this approach to map your own data and visualize whether or not there is a correlation between story points and the actual time required to complete your work. Be mindful that the main purpose of this exercise is to serve as evidence to prove that story points should not be mapped to hours. Doing it is supposed to be a one-time effort, the results of which would hopefully call this vicious practice into question. Providing proof based on your historical performance is the best approach to communicating the fact that converting story points into hours will land you in hot water. Now the question is, are you getting the right value from story points? When we talk about story points, the number itself shouldn't be that important. The actual conversation behind what needs to be done and how you can do it are the most important things. The main benefit of story points is that they trigger this conversation. Use story points to spark the conversation around the work that needs to be done in order to come up with the most feasible solution that brings value to your customers. And always keep in mind that the time spent actually doing the work is way more valuable than the time spent arguing about the number behind the work itself.